because this video is about faith proven by deeds. But first, let me briefly talk about the kind of racism that I see everywhere. The majority of racism is not, you know, people in the Klan marching and burning crosses. The vast, vast majority of racism is a sort of scientific racism. It comes down through the psychological operation units to a large degree. It's from the social clubs, it's from the corporations, and they say preposterous things that make the universities in this nation look really, really bad. Because most adults, if I remember correctly, have some kind of a college degree. They argue that in their belief, they think that Africa, to them, is governed poorly. Okay? Now, that is like saying that the concentration camps were governed poorly by the Jews in the camps. Everyone with any sense knows that Africa is thoroughly exploited and that all their leaders, like the politicians in America, are puppet leaders for globalists who are disproportionately white, Jewish, and LGBT. If you didn't know that, my goodness, where have you been? There's the blood diamonds arguments, many articles written about that, movies. There's the cocoa industry for the chocolate. Okay, there's gas. There's all kinds of resources that come from there that people, foreigners own the manufacturing processes that take place for those resources to come to your country, to your town, what have you. And what happens is they threaten and they murder and they fund leaders here, like they fund leaders in America. They fund presidents and so on and so forth, like they fund leaders in America. You see the same thing in Haiti, where they're looking for foreign aid. Okay, they never quite got on their feet after quote-unquote independence from the colonial places. And the colonial places like, the UK, America to some degree, really, France, what have you, when it comes to their former nations, they had already established businesses there and controlled things to a large degree. So it was kind of a business deal to give them a PR lift, because they looked bad by having all these powerful businesses in these African nations. Okay, so they look really bad, as colonial forces after it came out that all these colonial atrocities had taken place, like Leopold from Belgium, okay, and all the horrible things he did in Africa, slaughtering millions of people. So a lot of nations were getting their independence, and this continued, into pretty much recent history, okay, and that's what that is about. So we see that people don't understand basic things, and it's very, very disconcerting. They don't understand that you're better off having a history of being slaves than the slave owners. Okay, a lot of people don't understand this, believe it or not. You might think, well, duh, who wants to be an oppressor? My father, for example, he came here, in the 60s during the Nigerian Civil War. I don't come from an African-American bloodline. You see what I'm saying? But I still say this, even though my dad and his dad were not slaves and so on and so forth. Okay, I still point out that you're better off having been the offspring of the slaves than the slave owners. Okay, and especially when it comes to dating. It is not romantic to continue the ill-gotten gains from slavery, from the Native American genocide, from global exploitation. I mean, we look at all these things that these Western empires did. It is clear-cut that it is very shameful for them to have done them. But the true shame really comes when they refuse to give up their ill-gotten gains. They point to token minorities and say, well, there's plenty of black successful doctors and lawyers. I know, because my father's a brain surgeon. One of his brothers was a doctor. One of his brothers who passed away was a lawyer, graduated top of his class at UC Berkeley and Santa Clara University, and so on and so forth. Okay, I know that, but that doesn't change the fact that there's not that many. Black people, for example, there's not that many proportionally. That is, black people, for example, are less than 1 own less than 1/2 of 1% of the capital, something around something to that effect. Last I checked, and are 13% of America. Okay, this is a result of generational ill-gotten gains. This is a result of exploitation, and one of the main effects it has is sexual exploitation. Lots of African American women, lots of women in general, but certainly disproportionately black women, they turn to the sex industry. They're sex workers. They have traits that are sought after, like breasts and booty and so on and so forth. A lot of these liberals you see doing dances on TikTok, okay, they're quite often part black when they have a nice body, okay, and they're from people who were sexually exploited. You know, even in Mexico, there was black people there who were sexually exploited and kind of forced into marriages and out of desperation dated toward the money and so on and so forth. So as we look at this thing, we see extreme romantic injustice. And those same genes, with all due respect, no offense to anybody, express themselves to this day. It's even hard for me to get a date as a brain surgeon's son, as a top martial artist. Attractive women shun me. They try to get me to settle. People try to catfish me. And, you know, I go as far as to say that it is acknowledged by quite a few people that the most handsome picture ever taken, the most divine picture ever taken, was a picture that I had taken in about 2016. Okay, so even as somebody who's logically, right, using a universal scale, not your particular taste, the most handsome person, mind, body, soul, and spirit, that kind of inner beauty shining out, you know, this just has to be said. Put a lamp on its stand. It's not about being arrogant. I'm not arrogant or cocky. Okay, I'm shunned by females of black African descent, whether they are Puerto Rican, whether they are Mexican, whether they are African American, Ethiopian, you name it. Okay, these kind of mixed groups of people, even though I'm mixed, I'm shunned by them because that white supremacy is so extreme and it's so harmful. And that's what we're going to see when we explore Revelation. The first thing that it's chastising is white supremacy. Republicans, Democrats, okay, corporations, the government, the police, the military. These are the main people that are being chastised as leading people astray. I'm going to have to make this in two parts. So let's look at Revelations 2:2. He's speaking to the church in Ephesus, right? Jesus is a character in the story. He's speaking to Ephesus, okay? He says, I know your deeds, your hard work, and your perseverance. I know that you cannot tolerate wicked people, that you have tested those who claim to be apostles but are not, and have found them false. You see all these people, all these white supremacists, all these LGBT racists, they're arguing that you shouldn't judge people. But here Jesus is speaking to the church of Ephesus, and he says, great job. I know your deeds. I know your hard work and your perseverance. I know that you cannot tolerate wicked people, right? They're judging people. That you have tested those who claim to be apostles but are not, and have found them false. They said, you are not followers of Christ, and we're not supposed to yoke ourselves to sinners, repent, or kick rocks. You have persevered and have endured hardship for my name and have not grown weary. Yet I hold this against you. You have forsaken the love you had at first. Consider how far you have fallen. Repent and do the things you had at first. If you do not repent, I will come to remove your lampstand from its place. But you have this in your favor. You hate the practices of the Nicolaitans, which I also hate. And of course, a lot of these factions of the New World Order, white supremacy, LGBT supremacy, Jewish supremacists, they're like the Nicolaitans. There's all kinds of parallels we can draw. You know, because they're not worshiping God, they're worshiping their flesh-based ideas, their bloodlines, images of themselves and mere human beings, and mere idols made of stone and wood, and paintings of mere human beings. They cannot truly represent God. Okay. So we see it's clear here. It is clear. Okay? He said, you have given up, you have forsaken the love you had at first. So the good black guy, for example, right? And they're taken into slavery, and say he dies along the way, and some female, she prostitutes herself to the oppressor at the time, which happened to be white people. No offense to anybody. She has his kid. Their descendants over time take on his culture, which rejects the content of the character as a true scale, or pretends to use it as a scale, but doesn't actually use it. Okay? And therefore, the most righteous person that ever lives, me, I get shunned by these women. They forsake the righteous Africans like Nimrod, okay? They forsake Taharka, we see in Isaiah, who strikes down the enemies of the Israelites. Now, eventually, the Jews do the wrong thing. The kingdom of heaven is taken away from them. It's given to a people who perform its works. We see with Martin Luther King, we see with me, what have you, that it is black people, but it is a certain type, and I'm the last one after my flesh dies. It is done.